Okay, let's get it. This is a video explaining Rahu's aspects in Vedic astrology. So, Rahu aspects the 5th, 7th, and ninth place from itself. I know there's some other astrologers who give Rahu and Ketu more aspects than those, but I'm only going to stick with what I do and what I've learned. And I personally, even though I said Rahu gives off its 5th, 7th, and ninth aspect, I just do the 5th and ninth. The reason I don't do the 7th aspect, I don't look at the 7th one, is because across from Rahu, you have K2. So it gets pretty fucking confusing on that axis of Rahu and K2. Especially if you got a bunch of planets too, but it's just confusing in general. Because Rahu and Ketu, they're very similar. They just go about getting to damn near the same goal in a different way, in a different method. They like polar opposites. So it gets real confusing and tongue-tying and a real brain twister if you was to look at Rahu's 7th aspect, or if you was to look at Ketu's 7th aspect. But I just look at Rahu's 5th and ninth aspect. I look at the house it sits in, its 5th aspect, and its ninth aspect. Now, if you've been paying attention to my previous videos, and particularly the Jupiter video, you would notice that Jupiter also has its 5th and ninth aspect. And I said that, the aspects give off essentially the significations of the number correlating to the house that is originally ruled in the birth chart. So the 5th aspect would naturally have significations of like the 5th house, which is children, learning, education, hobbies, politics, romance. Something that you play around with, something that you might do from time to time, something that you might treat as a hobby, something that you're curious about learning, or something that you're curious about doing and exploring, but you might not really make it like your life mission to do so. And the ninth aspect can be associated and correlated with like the ninth house, which represents the father, the guru, the teacher, the guidance, the master of a profession, a field. And it represents dharma, the righteous, correct way that you and your soul should live and conduct yourself in this life and during this lifetime. So but you can almost throw those things out when you're talking about Rahu and Ketu, because you see Rahu, one of the nodes, the north node, it is in actuality a mathematical point. It isn't no physical planet, as y'all already know if you looked at enough of my videos or have a fundamental understanding of astrology. So these are points, and when the sun or moon hit them at the right time, you get an eclipse. And you get an eclipse when they hit them at the right time. So these figures, they don't produce their own light, is the point that I'm trying to get to. Rahu and Ketu, they do not produce their own light. So they derive their qualities and characteristics based upon the planet and signs that they come into contact and touch with. Sort of just like the moon. The moon doesn't produce its own light. It reflects the light of the sun. And the moon greatly gets its qualities and traits in your chart depending on what's aspecting it and what sign it's in. Just like sort of similar to Mercury, who mythologically is the biological son of moon. Moon and Mercury behave sort of the same way. It derives a vast majority of its traits and qualities based upon the signs in and what aspects it. Rahu and Ketu behave the same way, but to a much greater extent. How they are really going to behave will be seen based upon the sign they're in. Where is their dispositor? Meaning, if Rahu's in Taurus, See where Venus is at in your chart. If Venus is debilitated, not in a good sign, or if Venus is maybe in a disjuncta house and negatively impacted by malefic planets, then we can at least a general little analysis that the Rahu in that person's chart will behave maybe in a more lower consciousness level, maybe in a real materialistic level, or maybe in a more criminal-minded, violent matter in regards to what house is in. And then you will also want to look at where's the nakshatra lord placed for Rahu. What house is that in? And that will tell you the aims of Rahu. That will tell you where its focus is at. You really got to look at those. Because other than that, what I'll say for any Rahu video in general will be pretty vague or pretty general and won't be specified to you, the audience, unless you take all these factors into consideration. But who the hell got time to take in all these factors into consideration? So what are some of the natural significations of Rahu in general? Rahu represents the area of our life that we need to give the most attention. It shows an area in our life that we likely didn't focus on and give enough attention on over the course of our previous lives. And because it's an area that we have the least experience with, or that we need to work on or whatever, it naturally shows that as an area that we will make mistakes and fuck up a lot in that area. And Rahu blows up and enhances the qualities of the traits and signs and planets that is in and is associated with. That's what Rahu does. And what else does Rahu do? Rahu is, the head of the dragon. It's the head without a body. So it has an insatiable desire. It always wants more and more and more. Just like our ego. It's always thinking of something. It always needs something to do. It's always either solving problems or more times than not, it's creating problems. So therefore, Rahu and Ketu seem to be very malefic. But Rahu represents otherworldly things. So naturally, depending on where Rahu is at, especially if it's like associated with the ascendant lord, or if it's in the ascendant, depending on what house is in, it could naturally give inclinations to someone being into otherworldly things. Because you gotta remember, Rahu and Ketu, they're something that you can't physically see with your eyes. They are a mathematical position. They don't produce their own light. They're not something that you can physically touch or look at with a microscope, with a telescope. They derive their qualities based upon the signs, house, and planets they in. But since this is something that you can't see, just like a ghost, it can naturally give inclinations to someone being into things that you can't see, like aliens and conspiracy theories. Or it could give you interest into criminal stuff. Criminals do activities that they really don't want to be seen doing. Who want to draw attention to them while they're doing a crime, Or Rahu is naturally associated with things maybe like smoke and fire, because smoke vanishes and stuff, it just disappears. It just represents an interest in otherworldly things or hidden things, something like criminals might be into. Like it represents outer space or aircrafts, those type of things, because you're sort of defying the laws of physics. Humans, we can't fly. Birds can fly. Winged animals can fly. And we, as humans, we sort of defied the laws of the universe or of the world. And we have constructed and made vehicles that can help us fly and traverse the skies. So Rahu represents, rebelling against things also. And like I said, it just enhances the qualities and traits of things. So another thing, I'm sorry I'm giving like this long ass, I don't know, disclaimer or prologue before I really explain, but it's because I gotta do this. Because I can't talk about the aspects of Rahu or Ketu like I did the other planets, because there's so many things that come into consideration. And I just look at their aspects differently. I don't put so much emphasis on, oh, Rahu's fifth aspect, you'll just play around with that area. And his ninth aspect, you'll master that area. It really fucking depends on the sign and aspect that Rahu, it really depends on the sign and what planets Rahu comes into. So but I'll try to give some general examples. Let's say you have Rahu in the second house. Naturally, one of the things Rahu can do, it can make you exaggerate the wealth that you already possess. You might behave as if you got more money than what you have, but you really don't have none. It can make you, potentially, depending on all those other things, nakshatra lord, aspects, conjunctions, dispositor, depending on those things, Rahu in the second house can make you develop a criminal mind in regards to how you might decide to go and make your wealth. If it's heavily influenced by benefit planets, you might be real, you might be real advanced and skilled and charged and find ways to legally or positively make wealth. But if it's heavily influenced by negative planets and aspects and stuff, then you might find illegal ways to make your wealth. Rahu might make you a skilled speaker, or better yet, Rahu might make you someone who develops a desire to have exotic food, consume exotic food, and be a picky eater if it's placed in the second house. Now, with Rahu's fifth aspect, it's going to automatically look at the sixth house. So with Rahu's fifth aspect, we could see that, for one, someone might take this, skilled, otherworldly mind and intelligence and use it to overcome their daily sixth house routines and obstacles, such as finding ways to deal with their bills and debts and health issues, and deal with issues maybe around the job in their day-to-day life. They depending on Rahu, they will find skillful and clever ways to overcome the obstacles that they might have to face within the work environment or within their everyday life that obstacles are thrown at you. You'll find skillful ways to tackle and deal with those things. And then Rahu's ninth aspect will automatically go to the 10th house. So Rahu's ninth aspect would show that you would be someone who could naturally find a way to, you would probably prefer to be your own boss. You prefer to maybe be your own boss, with Rahu being aspect in the 10th house, and you could just take up career professions that are very Rahu-like in nature. Like I said, that would be maybe dealing with something with like airports, or being into astrology, or researching some occult stuff, researching secretive information, or just being into something that is weird, unusual, or taboo. Like maybe if you got Rahu influence in the 10th house or 10th lord, you could be a stripper, something of that nature. Something that is underworld, something that's frowned upon. Because Rahu and Ketu, they are, they wasn't, you would have to look at my Rahu Ketu video to understand everything that I'm saying in case I'm losing you, but they are known as Asuras. They was not supposed to drink this elixir that made them immortal. So they sort of represent outcasts. There we go, that's what I'm trying to get it to. Rahu and Ketu, they are like outcast shadow grahas, shadow planets. So therefore, you could deal with type of work that is sort of like, unusual, that makes you like an outcast to society. Not everybody around you is going to be into or working at NASA, or maybe into or work for an airline, or maybe some person who is researching secretive information, or maybe with Rahu aspect in the 10th house. I believe you could be someone who's really into, like, you could be possibly interested into like the tech field. Of course, the nakshatra and all that stuff really depends and shapes that direction, but you could be into the tech field, the tech world, you know? You could be into just otherworldly, futuristic things, because Rahu deals with things that are, it wants to discover new things. Rahu is more, I don't know. I want to say it's more. Rahu is more innovative. It's more forward thinking, and technology is always evolving. So you can see Rahu aspecting and influencing your 10th house. It could take you to stuff maybe like the stock market, something, or things of that nature. You get what I'm saying? I could go on and on, but that's really how I view Rahu's aspects. I take what is some of the natural significations of Rahu, and then I just be like, okay, Rahu's going to share that same signification and influence with his 5th aspect and his 9th aspect. Because really, like I said, the characteristics of these planets, of Rahu and Ketu, it greatly depends on their it greatly depends on the sign and the planet, because they got like their own significations of their own, but they greatly morph depending on the sign and all that stuff. So I'll do another one more. Let's say that you got Rahu in, I'm trying to think of a good house. Do I want to do the 3rd house, 4th house, 5th house, 6th house, 7th house, 8th house? I'll do Rahu in the 11th house. So let's say you have Rahu in the 11th house, and the 11th house represents large social network circles, organizations, and gains, the eldest sibling. And I already told you some of the many things that Rahu can represent. And like I said, depending on all the other things that I just told you that helps you decide what Rahu or Ketu will do, Rahu in the 11th house can either make you someone come up with great innovative ways to maybe bring people together and build up equity and funds and finances, or Rahu can make you alienate yourself for whatever reason when it comes to maybe working together with people and making money. So let's say that one of the possible scenarios, if you got Rahu in the 11th house, you might not be someone that people want to work with. For whatever reason, when it probably comes to working with your associates, your colleagues, and doing some group effort, you might either want to work by yourself, or your nature, something about you, would make you isolate yourself from other people. Like, no one will want to work with you. Either you won't want to work with them, or they won't want to work with you. That could probably be because maybe you are maybe slimy and grimy, and they probably say, oh, I don't want to do business with him, he's a shady person. Or maybe people be jealous of you. Who knows with Rahu in the 11th house? But those are some of the things that could happen. You, Rahu in the 11th house, could potentially, on the negative side, want to work together with people, rally and gather money, and then not use the money for what it's supposed to be for. Like a politician, or people who have GoFundMes. You might rack up a lot of wealth and then use that wealth in a con artist way. Or like I said, if Rahu is under great beneficial conditions, well then you might find more positive and nobler ways to rally and gather your money and maybe lead and bring people together. But with Rahu's 5th aspect, it will look at the 3rd house of younger siblings, neighbors, and written communication and all that stuff. So Rahu going into the 3rd house, you might have just maybe enhanced otherworldly skills when it comes to how you communicate to people, and when it comes to skills with your hands, because like I said, Rahu is that otherworldly energy, that thing that you can't see with your eyes, and it enhances stuff. So with the third house being associated with your hands, and you use your hands to be on your phone to communicate, it could show that maybe you like talking about and reporting interesting things on social media, or like you might be like some type of news reporter who likes to talk about and report on crazy stuff. Um, or you could be someone it could be a lot of things. You could be like Howard Stern if Rahu's in the third house, or aspects the third house. Or you could be someone who's greatly skilled with their hands, like a boxer or something, depending on the sign and all that stuff that's influencing Rahu, if it aspects the third house. Or you might be someone who, like I said, with Rahu in the second house, could exaggerate the relationship with your money. You might your communication in general might be exaggerated. You know, you could just be someone who just tells a story and you just exaggerate the events of something that happened. Like you might say that, oh, this and this happened, but it didn't really happen. You're just being funny and you're exaggerating things or whatever. It just depends. You could exaggerate your speech. So you could either be lying, or you could just be dressing up things. Or you could be you could be a skilled speaker, a skilled communicator, or a con artist. And that could also be good if Rahu's in the 11th house, because you could find ways to skillfully and manipulatively communicate in a way to gain large amounts of wealth within the 11th house. So those are some of the things that Rahu could do. You might exaggerate the relationship that you have with your siblings if Rahu aspects the third house. You know, you might think that you have a great relationship with your siblings, but you're so blinded because Rahu's an eclipse. It's an eclipse that you think that you have a great relationship with your siblings, but you might actually rub them the wrong way. And either they tell you about the way that you rub them the wrong way and you just ignore it, or you're just blind to how you might be harming and damaging the relationship connection that you might camera cut, but you might be damaging. It might be ignorant to how you're damaging and negative influencing the connection and relationship you might have with your siblings if Rahu aspects the third house potentially. And then with Rahu's ninth aspect, it will look at the 7th house of business, relationships, and marriage. So Rahu aspecting the 7th house, we could see a lot of things. We could see that you might attract and date people who are foreign, because Rahu and Ketu represent foreign things. You might date someone who is of a different race and ethnicity and all that good stuff. You might go and have this creative, otherworldly, advanced mind and intelligence and way of dealing with people on a one-on-one basis, on an intimate basis. In other words, you might have a skilled, advanced way and intelligence of conducting business with people, because 10th from the 10th is the 7th house. So you might have this skilled way of doing business and dealing with people. What else could Rahu do aspecting the 7th house with the 9th aspect? Rahu can make you lust for relationships. It can make you lust for partnerships. It can make you lust to potentially maybe have to deal with people, interact with people, make gains with people. Rahu can give you an insatiable desire towards partnerships, whether it's business or romantic. And because Rahu is a head without a body, it's an insatiable desire. So you could be constantly never satisfied with the things that it comes into contact with and with the aspects. You'll constantly want more and more and more. And depending on the conditions of Rahu and the dispositor and the nuptial lord, you could go about going to get more and more, either in a negative way or maybe a positive way. And that's essentially how I interpret Rahu's aspects. I just take, like I said, I take some of those natural significations of Rahu and the sign that it's in, and I just be like, okay, Rahu's going to take that energy and he's going to influence it with the fifth aspect in this house. And then he's going to take that energy and he's going to influence the ninth aspect, the ninth house from itself with that energy. And for the most part, in my opinion, in my interpretations and analysis, it has shown results. I see the influences on other people when I ask them about this, when I look at their charts. So that's how I interpret Rahu. People might interpret it differently. I'm sure they interpret Rahu differently with his aspects, but that's how I do it. That's how I have seen results. This is what has worked for me, and yeah. I hope this has helped you to some extent, get some understanding, and I'm about to move on with my next video.